Our recording has now been activated, and we're going to begin. So starting off with, we're going to give you a quick breakdown of what today's agenda is going to look like. So first, we're going to dive into the subject of the census, its importance and its benefits, and then we're going to circle to the subject of voting, its importance, and also culture and tradition, how that may play a part in it. With that being said, we're going to have some coping with the new normal so that we can kind of understand how to absorb and use all this material and this information in our current situation. With that, we're going to have some closing announcements and some resources page as well, and time for questions and answers. So with further ado, you might have seen some of the other panelists or other people with the camera on. Those are going to be our panelists today, and I'm going to take a second to actually allow each professor and each panelist to kind of introduce themselves a bit. So starting with our first maestro, you might have seen him singing. I didn't hear him sing, but I saw him singing. That's going to be Professor Ulises Rodriguez from Mountain View campus. Professor, if you can say some few words and introduce yourself to the crowd.
Yes, good morning, everybody. My name is Ulises Rodriguez. I'm a Spanish faculty at Mountain View College, and I'm also trying to recruit students for the Hispanic Honor Society at Mountain View College / Dallas College.
All right.
Campus,
Thank you,
Mountain View
sir.
campus.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for being here. Next up, we have Professor Kat Ruggiero. And again, just saying, if you have been on the Eastfield campus, you definitely know Professor Kat. She's a lively person with a wealth of knowledge. And Professor Kat, could you speak a little bit more?
I love that, lively. That I take that as a massive compliment.
Yes, ma'am.
Um, so I'm Professor Kat. I'm actually Ruggiero Van Deventer, but it's a really long name, so Ruggiero is fine. I teach U.S. history, Mexican American history, and civil rights. I'm a very proud Chicana activist, and I used to be the advisor for LULAC. I may be going forward. I don't know yet. We'll see what happens after this whole COVID stuff passes. But I am always easily found in the G building. Please come see me. I love to talk about history.
All right. Thank you, ma'am. All right. So next up, and you might notice that the last two presenters, our panelists, are actually you've seen them before because they were actually in one of our previous events, which was Hispanic and Latinx and its terminologies. So someone new to our scene for a panelist, but we're so grateful that he's here is Mr. David Thompson, and he's also hailing out of the El Centro campus. And Mr. David, could you talk a little bit?
Yeah, hey, thanks for having me. And I'm really excited to be a part of this event. Yeah, I'm a professional counselor at El Centro, part of your counseling services that are free and confidential to all students at all campuses, currently operating both in the virtual environment. And so, yeah, looking forward to presenting you with useful tips to deal with the stresses of living in a time of pandemic. And so, yeah, looking forward to speaking with you later.
All right. Thank you. And again, if you're needing all the information, please make sure to also put it in the chat, as in throughout the chat, we'll be providing the links and the subject of the things we're being discussed today. So starting off with, let's get right into it. Our first section is going to be the census and voting. So I'm first going to kick it off to Professor Ulises, and starting with the census. Can you tell us a little bit about why it is important, and some of its benefits?
Yes, so the census is required by the Constitution to be done every 10 years. And it is important because it is a head count of all those of us who are here in this country. It's important to remember that the head count, it's so valuable that if you remember whenever you were a child and you were on a field trip, the professor was always doing a head count. Didn't care if you were a man or a woman, older, younger, black, white. They were doing a head count, and that's one of the things that we need to keep in mind. Why is it important? Because that's pretty much how resources are distributed. Of course, at the political side, it has its element of how many representatives, and et cetera, et cetera. But the most important thing is to think about the money. How is this money going to be distributed? That's why it's very, very important. If you have problems in with the schools, the quality of the building of the school, I'm not talking about the quality of education, but the quality of the building of the school, the health clinics, after school programs, the public transportation, which I should mention here in Dallas, it's okay, very okay. But the roads it's a really big problem, especially south of I-30. That is an area that really needs to be considered. Your playgrounds on your community, the community centers that sometimes we have to take advantage of. The quality of those places is going to depend upon you answering this census, because the money is going to be redistributed among those. It is for those services. And if we don't count, if we don't raise our hand, if we don't say, here's my mom, here's my dad, here's my sister, if we don't tell them how many we are, they're not going to give us money. It's like whenever you remember your childhood and daddy had like 10, 20 extra bucks, and none of you, he says, hey, I have money for you. Who wants it? And if somebody didn't raise a hand, you didn't get the money. It's something kind of similar to that. And it's also very important for them to let them know that we are here. If we are what is legally considered a minority, we have to let them know that we are a minority that lives here in this area, in their circumstances, because otherwise they're going to keep ignoring us. And you don't want to be ignored. You probably want to be like the Mocedades song used to say, "Quiéreme, rómpeme, mátame, but do not ignore me." And we don't want to be ignored. We don't want to see all this unrest that is happening out there because they ignore us. And the reason they ignore us, aside from the ones that you probably can infer on your own, is because we have not officially tell them we are here. We are trying to unofficially tell them, hey, we're here, but we're really not doing that much of a work when it comes to that. It is super important that you answer the census. The census this year went online. All this was pre-COVID-19, but hey, it is online. You can do it on your phone, you can do it on your pad, you can do it on your computer, you can even do it by phone. Did you know that? You can call, and I'm gonna put this number later on, but you can call the census at 844-330-2020, and you can submit the census by phone. You don't have to do the phone. You don't have to even get online. You can just grab your phone and dial that number and answer the questions. The questions are very simple and at the same time very important. We, the Hispanic Honor Society, last year, we were considering to get into this census conversation because there was all this rumor about we're going to insert the citizenship question. And while most of my students are born here in the United States, the truth is that some of their parents were not, and they have not finished the citizenship process. A whole lot of us, or by now I am a citizen, but it took me about 10 years to get my citizenship. But there's a whole lot of people who lives with a permanent residency. Everybody should be counted, and everybody is allowed to count. It's allowed to do the census. We should remember that the citizenship question is out of the census. Therefore, every household has to reply to that census. We need to let them officially know that we are here.
Right.
That's what is so very, very important.
Right. So, Professor Ulises, thank you for starting us off with such a heavy understanding of it. And Professor Cat, I'm going to send it to you in a second. But also, if you notice on the PowerPoint that we have the date of October 5th currently on there, because this is something that has recently changed and is currently changing as well. The original date for the census deadline was actually September 30th, which is tomorrow. But with that being said, if you're paying attention to the news, there's currently an injunction in the courts to have it extended to October 5th Again, that is also just next week, Monday. So, and at this point, we're trying to urge all listeners to be part and make sure you're being part of Census. This is a conversation to definitely have with your family members, because if one, it all takes one person in the household to answer the census, not multiple people. Am I saying that right, Professor Cat?
Sorry, my mic was muted. Yes, that's correct. You can count whoever's in your household. Not to be completely morbid, but I actually filled out our census the beginning of April,
Mhm.
and we lost my husband. He passed away on April 10th, but he isn't counted in the census because we did it beforehand. So, and only I did that. So only one person in your household has to do your census. The only thing that I wanted to add to that, because that was perfect. I mean, I really don't have much to say to add to that. That was a shining endorsement for the the census. Uh, but mine is more talking about this idea of race versus ethnicity
Mhm.
on your census, because question 5 on the census is the really important one, the one that I talk about the most. And that one is saying that if you check the box, a lot of people don't understand that on the census, there's only 5 races. That's it, just 5. White American, Black or African American, Native American or Alaska Native, that's the same category, Asian American, and Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islander. Did you hear me say Latino or Hispanic? No. Question 5 asks, if you identify as Hispanic, what Hispanic are you? And it says, I actually have it pulled up right here. Either no, I'm not of Hispanic, Latin, or Spanish origin. Yes, I am Mexican, Mexican American, or a Chicano. Yes, I'm Puerto Rican, or yes, I'm Cuban, or yes, I'm another Hispanic, another category, and you can write it in. So again, these are very, very specific items, and what Professor Rodriguez was talking about is this idea that we're trying to allocate funds for each community. So if you've got a very heavy African American that is very heavy Latino or whatever, then you want to make sure that they get the right resources, the correct resources, especially. And I know that Professor Thompson can talk to this even in mental health, right? All of these things all play a factor. And so if you don't, like Professor Rodriguez said, if you don't raise your hand and be counted, how are they going to know where to send the money? Right. So that's why it's so important.
Right. So since we're on this topic of importance and shifting to impact, I was going to start with you, Professor Cat, and talk a little bit about voting. And just for those of you who are not aware, today is actually the first presidential debate, if I'm correct, will be
Yes,
this
they
evening.
are.
And could you speak a little bit more to some of the importance of getting counted and then the impact and how that leads to voting?
I'm not gonna lie, I think I'm gonna be having a little bit of a wine tonight with that debate because
Okay.
I I'm a little terrified of it, but we'll see what
We'll all
happens.
have popcorn. It's
Yes.
something worthwhile.
We'll see what happens for sure. But voting, yeah, I mean, I can't emphasize how important voting is. If you are legal age, if you are a United States citizen, you have that status, you're allowed to vote. Please register to vote. Please, please, please by October 5th. You have to have it mailed in. You know, it's really funny because I'm sitting here in my head listening to Professor Rodriguez talk about the census and how easy it is, and you could do it online, you could do it on the phone. Voting is not that way. God, I wish it was. They've made it so difficult. But your first step is absolutely, we just passed it this past Tuesday, a week ago today, we passed National Voter Registration Day. And we actually, our numbers were off the charts. They were really, really good. So I'm hoping for an incredibly good turnout for this cycle. I always tell my students the most important voting you can do is your local elections, your municipalities, absolutely, your school boards, all those kind of things. However, 2020 is a pivotal year as far as as far as Senate, the people that are up for a change in seats, and of course the presidential election. These are all incredibly important things, and I just urge you to do your research. I urge you to vote because it is important. So many times I hear my students tell me, "Why should I vote? It's not going to count. I'm one person." Well, if everybody did that, then who's going to control it? Who's going to make those decisions? You don't get to sit there and complain about laws that are being made or acts that are being done against you, executive orders or anything like that, if you didn't vote. You don't get a say because you could have done something. So please vote.
Right. Thank you for that. And in a moment, and towards the end of this, again, this whole presentation is available, and there's actually a Dallas College voting video that's currently out that we all urge you all to play and look into. Now, Professor Rodriguez, to come back to you, because in our previous event, you mentioned that the fact that you have actually been able to experience two different elections in your transition in your transition to Texas. And in that sense, you said that that actually made the difference in what sets you on your path to be a professor. Could you talk a little bit more about the impact and how it shapes the next generation?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that made the United States so attractive for me was number one, I've been following politics in Mexico since 1970, 77, 78, somewhere around there. And so I learned how it works. I even got involved into politics down there. And then I got invited to come here to the States, and I was able to compare both political systems. And it is super, super interesting how it happens here in the States. But the most important thing that needs to be addressed is the Electoral College. Some of us who come from Latin American countries, it is a direct vote. Technically, it's a popular vote. Here in the United States, they have something that is called the Electoral College, that at least Mexico does have, but they are used just simply to certify the voting, and it's done. Over here, the Electoral College, it counts per state, and it counts differently. For example, right now you're hearing that Biden has a 10% advantage over 10% advantage over President Trump. Yet the reality is that whenever we're counting, you will also hear the battleground states. Those battleground states, while they might not have that 10% advantage for one candidate or the other. So that, to me, makes it super interesting. But that is also what is super important to vote. People have been talking for the longest time that Texas might be a purple state or flip it to blue state. The truth is that because of some other working that is being done at the state legislature in all states, it doesn't matter how many more of one party are or how many of the other one. The truth is that this electoral college is going to count the votes as they wish, as they have to. But at this, on the same token, that's why it's important for us to vote. Not to pretend that because I live in this area, and it looks, the way I think politically, everybody's going to do so, or that at the state level it is going to happen. I agree with Professor Reguero. It is extremely important that we are also voting at our municipal level, at the local level, but I'm really more focusing into the national and the state election. But that's why it became so interesting and important to me, to the fact that I was invited to be here for only a few years, and I became a citizen. That's just how interesting, important, and realistic the voting here in the United States is.
Thank you. And at this point, I also want to remind the audience, as we're going over different topics, please feel free to ask your questions in the chat, and also raise your hand so that way we can cover some of these topics, because we've talked about a couple different things in regards to like mail-in ballot voting, the deadline for the census. In general, there may not be too many opportunities for questions to be asked in the space, and as this is an educational space, please feel free to ask your questions. So, shifting gears a little bit, we're going to talk a little bit about race and tradition, race and ethnicity, the same with how Professor Cat talked about a little bit, and how does culture and tradition fit into it. So I'm starting with Professor Ulises. You mentioned that how sometimes your surroundings may not everyone may think the same or maybe vote the same. Can you talk about how culture and tradition plays an impact in how we view politics in the government?
So here's the other thing. Whenever we come from our countries, particularly in Mexico, the election is decided from the minute, or it was decided from the minute the candidate was announced by a certain party. That's something that it doesn't happen here in the United States. But because of that tradition, people don't vote because it has been decided for me. Why should I care? Remember, that doesn't happen here in the States. But the problem is that our relatives who come from those other countries have the same mentality. That's why they don't vote. So it is important for us to let them know, tío, tía, grandpa, that doesn't happen here in the States. It is important that you go vote because that part of the tradition does not work. The fact that there is a ruling party right now does not mean that that it cannot be a different party ruling this country later on. So that part of the tradition or part of the culture needs to be thrown away. And I understand about COVID-19, it might make it more difficult for us to go out and vote, but it is really, really important for us to take advantage of early voting and the voting election. Personally, I will not, with all the scandals that are happening with the mail, I will not even try to mess with that. Besides, I don't qualify for it. But it is really important that we keep that ideology that it has been selected, that the ruling party is ruling, and my vote is not going to change anything. Again, it's the same as the census. If we don't talk, if we don't say this is what I want, then they're not going to hear us. And trying to quote Jay Leno, and I don't know if he created the phrase or not, but if you don't vote, then you have the government you deserve.
Okay, that's a good quote. Professor Cat, shifting to you, since earlier you mentioned LULAC, and also in past presentations you've alluded to your activism, and even like through UCLA, if I'm saying it wrong, during your college times. Can you talk a little bit about the subtle differences in how voting and how race and culture also plays the differences once for those who are maybe second or third generation?
Sure. So, it's actually Cal Berkeley, but yes,
I'm so
it's
sorry.
still a slight difference. Cal Berkeley is just absolutely known for its protesting. It's what we do.
So that's the place to actually go.
Sorry. That is the place to go if you want to be a social activist and learn how to do it the right way and actually take courses on it, which is what I did. But anyway, I digress. So I'm sorry, what was your question about again?
Oh, the
If you
question was some of the differences, the subtle differences, when it comes to how second or third generation students may consider or see the voting and how culture plays a part in that.
So, what's interesting is, and it's sad, and I'm really hoping that this changes, but what I've noticed is that the older generation, my parents' generation, they do get out and vote. They really do. It's the young ones that you know what? It's funny. It's the middle because the millennials, the up and comings right now, they're voting. They're actually getting out and voting. Of course, they were all over Bernie and all these kind of ideas, but they are voting, right? It's my kind of middle generation, Generation X, as we call ourselves. For some reason, we don't think we have an impact. We don't think that we can make change. We don't want to be bothered. Politics are all corrupt. And I mean, I hear so many times they're all corrupt. They're all liars. Why would I vote for anybody? Because someone has to, someone has to actually be in charge. It's kind of how it works. We don't live in a dictatorship. And if we don't vote, we're going to live in a dictatorship. So that's kind of what I've seen is these, if you compare these three generations, that's kind of what I've seen. So it does give me hope because these younger ones really do want to make a change. I think they're looking at it and maybe rightfully so, maybe or not, but they're blaming the older generation for where we're at. Right? And we could do better. We could do better. Let us have a shot at it. Right? So that does give me hope. That's what I said. I put up on the side here in the chat room, only 58.1% of the United States eligible voters voted in 2016. That may seem like a lot. It's not. If you're eligible to vote, go vote. We can do better. Our numbers have got to go up. We don't live in a democracy. We're not representative if we don't vote. So that's all.
Thank you.
You're
All
welcome.
right. So we've been
And
talking.
I wanted to add that even though with that 58%, to go back to the emphasis that I was putting on the Electoral College, uh, about 3 million more people voted for the loser on the last election, and yet we have a different president than the popular vote winner. So it's very, very important that, like Professor Reguero is saying, I don't know if she's a doctor or not, but like she's saying, we can do better than that 58%. Go on.
All right. So talking about a couple of strategies and stuff, so a couple of dates to know. So earlier we talked about the last day register to vote, which is actually October 5th. If you haven't realized, this is also the last day for the census. So again, that is this upcoming Monday. And then for early voting, because we understand that COVID is a thing, and Mr. David will be coming to you in a second. And COVID is the thing, and that can affect how you want to time in going to the polls, maybe not going on election day like November 3rd. So between October 13th to October 30th, you do have that window of time to actually do early voting in terms of when to go, in terms of what locations to go, and all the links will also be provided in here as well. So speaking of locations, if you haven't noticed as well, a lot of campuses, and if you were even younger, you would notice a lot of your parents or older eligible voters would go to middle schools or educational places to vote. So just for an update in terms of the Dallas College, these are actually the locations and addresses of each campus in the Dallas College district, in which the early voting is actually you're actually able to cast your votes the day of, for early voting and actually election day voting. And as you notice, each campus will have its different dates and specific buildings in which you can go to, in which you'll be received, and they have to go through the instruction period, the instructions, and how to be able to vote safely.
I
So,
just
yes, ma'am.
can I just add really quick, because I know our students get really confused, and this is kind of geared toward our students, so I really want them to understand.
Mhm.
Early voting, you can vote anywhere you see a place to vote. Pull over your car, go and vote, right? Wherever you feel safe, do your social distancing, stand in line, wear your mask, vote. On election day, if you choose to wait until that day, which, oh, please don't, the lines are insane. But if you choose to wait until election day, you must go to the place where you are registered. They will have your name on there, your ID on there, and that's the only place they'll accept you. So if you try to go and pull over on some place on election day, you're not going to get to vote and it won't count. So please, 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 please be informed. You can vote anywhere in early voting, but on election day, you have to be registered.
All right. Thank you, Professor Cat. And then for some couple of events, because in which we're coming up, are more in which we're hosting, but are more suited towards the topics we're talking about today. For example, yesterday we had a little campaign drive about make sure you're election ready. You're election ready. Also, we had again today. There's going to be the election debate watch party this evening, and that's going to be hosted through the Brookhaven campus on Blackboard Collaborate. The links and everything will be provided in the chat and also on this presentation as well. Now, as we notice, again, the last day for to register to vote is October 5th. As well, if you're not yet registered to vote, we also have a drive-through voter registration with Hot 93.3. This is a collaboration with Dallas College and the Hot 93.3 as a campaign to get you to vote. That's going to be in the Dallas College West Dallas Center campus. So we ask you to check out that event if you've not yet registered to vote. And again, this is a drive-through voter registration. This is similar to some of those other drive-throughs events that you've seen or heard about on the news. Going forward, October 20th will be prepared to vote what's on the ballot. So earlier you heard Professor Cat and also Professor Rodriguez talk about the fact that it's not only the presidential election, but also sometimes it includes like your municipalities, your state elections, and your local electors as well. So this event is geared towards telling you more about what's on the ballot, what issues are on the ballot. It's not just people, but what Professor Cat, and tell me if I'm saying this wrong, because I know both of you are my other government professors. Sometimes there are issues on the ballot, and sometimes there are mandates on the ballot. It's not just names on the ballot, correct?
Sadly, yes.
Okay.
It's another thing that I call voter suppression. It's another way, yet another way to
Mhm.
get you to not vote necessarily how you thought you were going to vote. Um, Voters really need to educate themselves. That's really all I can tell you. Educate yourself and then go cast your vote.
Okay. Thank you, Professor. And to me, to be honest, what that sounds like is the same way how you prepare for a test. It's the same way you need to put some energy into getting used to getting familiar with some of the materials. So, for example, if you're going to the vote, if you're going to the ballot for the first time, you might want to take some time to see what the ballot looks like, what's on it, and even familiarize yourself with some of the names on the ballot, right? So that way you know what you're voting for and who's what. It's easy for us to know the bigger names as they're always in the news, but sometimes you may not even know your local official, and that's something that you might want to take some time to do so. And last but not least on this list is November 3rd. We're also going to have Election Day watch party as well. So we ask that you join us as we kind of go through the whole process. We'll see what the votes is and what the outcomes become. So switching real quick, I know we have covered a lot of topics, and sometimes the priorities, people's priorities, and also your health is more important. Like, I want to do these things, but how do I do this safely? Mr. David, could you talk to us a little bit about how to cope during our new normal?
You bet, you bet. And I'm just so thankful for the important information that's being shared, and I'm definitely feeling motivated. I'm proud to say I've, completed my census earlier in the summer for my household. And so just to get this information is incredibly empowering. But yeah, we are living through an unprecedented time right now. And I just want to acknowledge that some of our ability to cope with stress, cope with some uncertainty, some anxiety about the future, all of that is going on all the time for a lot of people because we're living through a pandemic. And so when we add things to that, it can sometimes feel overwhelming. Adding, um, fall classes and maybe some midterms coming up in October, the election, important civic events can sometimes make it feel overwhelming to us. And so I just wanted to briefly introduce some um, helpful tips for coping with that, while also just kind of normalizing that as well. And so, JC, if you could advance the slide, we'll go into. Am I able to do that? Or
Tips. Here we go. Mr. David, we're on the tips and coping. We got our helpers in the background.
oh, okay, gotcha.
Okay.
Gotcha. Yeah, so I just wanted to normalize. Sorry, it wasn't showing up for me, and so I was waiting for it. Just want to normalize some of the common responses that you and many others are having right now in dealing with the pandemic are increased anxiety, worry, or fear, concerned about your loved ones or your community, dealing with uncertainty and frustration because there's lack of clarity on what's going on, what the best steps are, feelings of loneliness as we socially isolate and distance ourselves from people, maybe even anger at the way things are being handled or the way we're being treated, feeling confusion, which can lead to just ambivalence, like not knowing which way to go, using alcohol or drugs to cope with these added stressors, which again, these are normal responses. These are things that most people are experiencing, which may even include symptoms of depression, feeling like things are kind of hopeless and lost, to feeling symptoms of post-traumatic stress, and that I've been endured something very traumatic and stressful in a way that my brain is dealing with it in a traumatic stress response sort of way. And so I'm really pointing this out just to make you feel like you're not alone in this. And especially as a college student, there was a study done earlier in the year by the Healthy Minds group out of University of Michigan. Survey students all the time, but this one was particularly interesting because it was during the first months of the pandemic here in the United States. And so 19,000 students were surveyed, and they compared the results with their survey from the fall of 2019. And most students reported an increase in anxiety, depression, and other mental health concerns that interfered with their academics. 2/3 of all respondents reported increased financial stress. 2/3 reported that they were very or extremely concerned about the future. There's a lot unknown, especially in March and May, and not much really has changed as far as understanding where this is taking us and when it's going to end, and the economic impacts to our lives. And so that's kind of the environment. That's where we are as we're being asked to do these important things, like getting out to vote, educating ourselves. And so just some ways to help build that resilience, build that ability to cope with this new normal of kind of constant stress and anxiety. Simple steps that you can take, and I really like the emphasis on, hey, these are things that you can do. You can educate yourself as a voter. You can take control of stress and anxiety. The same message is what I'm sharing with you. To stay informed, that's both on health issues and on these important issues like the census and voting. You're here because you want to be informed, and so this is a good sign. But staying informed through trusted information sources, and so that's a key part. So whether it's health information through agencies like the CDC or our county health officials, and the same would go for important election information, that you really trust your resources, and double check and check and double check where your information is coming from. Being your own advocate. So this is just when you are encountering things that either make you uncomfortable with health situations. So, being exposed to people who aren't following safety guidelines and things like that, that you take responsibility for that, and use your voice to advocate for yourself. It could be communicating with an instructor about the things that are going on with your life, if you're caring for somebody who's sick, if you yourself are sick, but not letting that be a passive event that happens to you, but instead being proactive and saying, I can do something about this, even if it's a small step.
All right.
Relaxing your body often. That's a really important part, because often our responses to stress are involuntary, meaning that they trigger our fight or flight response. And so that is a bodily, physical response to stress that keeps us safe in dangerous situations. And so it's helpful, but often things like tests, things like doing something new or different for the first time, meeting somebody new or different for the first time, can bring up all those same physical responses. And they often get in the way of us being able to function at our highest level. And so taking time to take deep breaths, taking time to stretch and get exercise, doing things like mindfulness exercises or meditation, prayer, things that kind of connect you to the present moment and take you out of worries about the future, regrets from the past, but bring you to the present moment and bring a sense of calm to your physical body is really important there too.
All right. So, Mr. Davis, just again, since you being part of the care team based out of our central campus, could you talk a little bit about some of the free resources? Because all of this sounds really, really good, but it's COVID. My money might be somewhere else. Can you tell us some of the resources that Dallas College offers?
Sure, sure, and they're good ones too. So some of the things that are available, these are all free and accessible to students. So the first one that I want to talk about is a new resource to our college, and that is an app, a mental health, wellness, and app that we now have access to called Tau Connect. And so basically this is something that you keep on your phone or keep on your browser and access on a daily basis to just do little check-ins, and it'll ask you, how are you doing today? And you can report, hey, I'm feeling stressed out, and it will suggest different modules or lessons to work on your own self-care and management of stress and anxiety, depression, any of the things that I mentioned before. This app is going to help you with lessons and exercises and ways to track and monitor your progress. And so that is available through, I think some links are probably being dropped in the chat. Is that right, JC?
Yes. So as everything we're talking about, again, you'll be able to have access to this presentation as well, and the links are going to be dropped in the chat as well. Continue, sir.
So yeah, that's access through the Counseling Services resources page on the Dallas College website. And that's also where you can find out more information about counseling services. These are mental health services that are available free to students. Again, free to students. If you are lucky, you could find a counselor out in the community, probably in their training program, that is taking maybe a sliding scale rate of $30 to $50 per session. And that's on a weekly basis for up to, 6 weeks to many months that you would be paying that. While you're a student here, you have access to free mental health counseling. And we're really excited to be here for our students as they navigate, just the difficulties or the exciting changes that happen while you're at college. And so access those. We are, again, providing that in a virtual environment right now. And so you're able to connect using a secure platform to have counseling from the comfort of your own home.
All right. So again, Mr. David, I want to say thank you for that. And again, everything that's being said will also be dropped in the chat. And we ask that you take the time as we go into all this information to come back to it and what's the word I'm looking for? I believe take it and digest it as you see breath, you see fit. I think I'm going to use some of your tips on here. I'm going to relax my body and pace myself a little better. And at this portion, we want to make sure it's that we want to open it for questions to our panelists, as well as to our audience. So if you happen to have any questions at this point, we ask that you put it in the chat feature or even raise your hand so we can read some of them. We know that Professor Ulises and Professor Kat, you all have been doing a great job already answering some of these questions in the chat and responding to our audience. But at this moment, if anyone has any questions, please go ahead and do so.
I actually have a question for David. So sadly, I do have students that are directly affected by COVID. They've lost members of their family, and they turn to me, and I'm not a health professional. And honestly, I'm dealing with my own grief right now. So I have grief groups. I'm trying to get through it just like anybody else. How can I best serve my students when they come to me like that, though?
Yeah, we love taking referrals from our faculty and staff. That is one. It tells us, it just reminds us that we're within a community of caring professionals, even those who aren't. It's not their stated job to do that. So hearing that you are concerned and want to connect your students, that's encouraging to hear. And so just connecting them with a counselor at your campus. So I know Mr. Jaime Torres and Katie Neff are there at Eastfield, and they're awesome. And so, we are ready for those referrals. So just send them our way. You can also place a care team report. The care team exists to help the campus make connections to people to break down those silos that maybe you feel like I'm the only person, who knows a student and they're telling me, but instead kind of get them connected to the wider campus community, so care team, or just reaching out to your counseling services.
So it's not overstepping my bounds to do a care report on them so that you'll check on them, or? Okay.
Exactly. No, that's how we know. That's how we get to know. So it's always encouraged. Thank you.
Right. Thank you for that. I think, are there any other questions to come in? Professor Ulises, anyone again? Professor Cat, any other questions? David, do you have questions from our census and voting experts as well? Okay. So again, and if you notice in the chat, someone has definitely dropped a link to, thank you, Professor Cat, in regards to grief and loss, for free counseling sessions. And please, again, as you being students of the Dallas College, you are able to, again, access our resources for free on any campus in regards to mental health, and really sometimes just needing a break. So moving on, transition a little bit, we're going to hit you with some upcoming events and things that we have going on. Now, first of all, we'd like to mention that if you are a student and you're currently on Blackboard, which is where you turn all your assignments in, if you click over to the community tab, you will notice that there's actually a student life community on there. Feel free to join it or search it. Again, in the community tab on your Blackboard, search the word student life, and you'll be able to actually connect to all the students and all the different events we have in regards to the month, in regards to this month, and all in general. Now, with that being said, here's some of the upcoming events we have coming today. So at noon, well, I apologize, at 2 o'clock today, we have our do-it-yourself piñata. I myself have never made a piñata. I know how to break a piñata. I definitely know I had to enjoy all the candy from the piñata. But if you want to know a little bit about how to do it, join us on IG Live at BC_student life, and also MVC Student Life as well. So that's going to be our Brookhaven campus as well as our Mountain View campus as well. This evening, it's going to be a starstruck evening for sure. Have your popcorn ready, and actually at 7:30 as well, we have a live interview with our Arts Live performer, our Chicana performer, artist Christian Cruz. We ask that you take a second to check out her work and see what she has to offer. Again, that's also going to be on IG at Eastfield Arts. Again, all this will be located in this link as well if you're interested. And past, like we talked about earlier, we have our presidential debate today as well. And that's also on the 29th, and also started at 7:30. That's going to be hosted through Blackboard Live. One is on your phone, one is on your laptop. I'm sure some multitasking can happen there. But with all this talking, I get a little hungry sometimes. And tomorrow, for our September 30th event at noon, we have a how to make different salsas. So tomorrow, join the Eastville campus as we come about some home recipes, some makeshift recipes, and you figure out how to make your own salsa and some other very interesting dishes. So please join us here on the same team side tomorrow at noon. Following that, we have our next speaker conversation, TED Circle, and that's going to be on the 1st, again, with Michael Navarro, again, and that's going to be right here on this team site. We have that followed up with our weekly health reports. So David, we try to get a little active. Every Thursday, we've been practicing a different dance lesson. So this Thursday, we're going to have a different Latin dance lesson, and it's going to be at 6 p.m., again, on this team site. And then finally, to round off the week, we have October 2nd, our conversation about Let's Talk Immigration and DACA. So the same way how we're trying to be very intentional in bringing up our audience up to date with voting, census, we're also going to talk about the conversation DACA. We're going to be introducing an outside party known as RIACES, and so they can talk a little bit more and have the best information going forward. So we ask that you check out the full list of events that we have coming up today, tomorrow, Thursday, and Friday. So with that being said, first I want to say everything that we've talked about earlier today, we have the resources on this PowerPoint presentation. You in this team site are able to come to this PowerPoint presentation under the files folder, where you can find out a little bit more about the census, a little bit more about voting and some of the instructions for it, our counseling services, mental health tips, as well as even our service nurse line. So we ask that you take your time to familiarize yourself with this presentation. And before we get out of here, I wanted to give the panel again, thank you for being here. I want to give you each a moment for your closing remarks in regards to the audience.
Can I just say two things? That's one thing. The
Yes,
first
ma'am.
one, the first one is about Raices. Amazing organization. Any students that are out there listening, tell your friends, please come to that. If you are under DACA, if you are considering being under DACA, please come to that. They are an amazing resource, and I'm so excited that Dallas College has them. My second thing is, um, I, I don't know if you're aware of this or not, but you cannot straight ticket vote in Texas as of right now, unless that changes. So what I encourage my students to do is to print out a sample ballot, decide who you're going to vote for. Keep that in your head. You are not allowed to bring in a cell phone. I've had so many students say, I had it on my cell phone. I knew what I was going to do. You can't bring it in. Okay. So please don't rely on that. And please, please, please early vote. You never know what's going to happen on election day. You may get busy. Who knows what's going to happen. And if you've cast your vote early, chances are you're not going to stand in huge lines. And honestly, for me, and it's just the way kind of how I am, I always think my vote counts more because it was early. I know it doesn't, but it's how I feel. Thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Professor Cat. David, I'm going to come to you next, and then Professor Ulises, you're going to take us out. So, David, any last words?
Just a reminder to take care of yourselves during these times, and take care of your community by registering for the census and registering to vote and voting on voting in our election. Yeah.
All right. And then Professor Ulises, if you would like to take us out, please.
Absolutely. Finally, I would like for everybody to remember that unfortunately, the people who work at the voting stations, they are elder people who are in the age risk for COVID-19. We are in the era of COVID-19. So I'm putting on the chat a link because there are still a few days left for you to sign up to be a poll worker. You need to get some training. So if you're a student, you are younger, the possibilities of you getting infected, while they are high, you are still very low on how you're going to react. So still be careful on how you're going to be treating all this training with other people, mingling with other people, but do what you can to become a poll worker, help out this election, because voting is not the only thing there is out there. We also can do the work, okay? Thank you very much.
So with that being said, I want to say a huge thank you for everyone coming out to today's event. Look out for the future other events that are happening today. The next one being how to do it on how to make a pinata, do it yourself pinata at 2 p.m. If you want to see the full list of events, we ask that you go to DCCD/HL months. I want to say a huge thank you to our panelists for being here. And again, for all professors and educators on the call, as well as our participants, you are able to come back to this team site for future events to see this recording again. And, let's just go ahead and vibe out on the way out. So thank you all for being here.